We got some news to get into. Ian Hazzikostas performing another interview talking about all the things World of Warcraft, from add-ons to current raids and everything else, the outlook of WoW, the future of WoW. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Also, some more current game knowledge and stuff to get into. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive straight in. Luminous spore gliders. That's right, you might start to see some this week. Upon reset, these things will finally be available. It's week 4, basically, of this patch, which means the 4 collections of the delicious spore snacks that you need to unlock this mount will finally be available. That's right, killing Rotmire in the Sporefall raid drops one every single week. You need 4 of them to unlock the mount. People are finally going to be able to get this thing, so the Luminous Spore Glider will be flying around and getting this, people will be able to use this mount finally and unlock it. It's a cool thing that Blizzard did. This thing is available on LFR difficulty, so even if you're not like a typical raider, doing this on LFR will unlock this mount for you as well. So start doing this if you haven't already. 4 weeks is all it takes, and you get yourself this Spore Glider mount. Also, something that was data mined, are you into Haranir or Amani trolls? Well, you're going to be able to now have some customizability to your home with that flavor. Not full-blown house looking stuff like we see with the Night Elf stuff coming, the Blood Elf stuff that was added to the game and everything else, but we are starting to see some customization options around Haranir-based stuff and around Amani trolls. So this is great for anybody who, this is what we wanted from Amani trolls, right? Fuck playable Amani, we just wanted decor items that are based on the race. So if you're interested, these are some murals that are coming in 12.1. We're moving on to the most delicious part of the news today. That's right, Ian Hazzikostas in his PC Games interview. Ian got into some interesting stuff here through this interview. We're not going to watch the entire interview, but we got some summarization here of some of the important things that were said. So let's just get into this. First of all, the Midnight response overall. Ian talked about the overall success of Midnight so far. He says he's been very happy with the World Soul Saga, where the story's going, how players have been reacting to things. He did say that one of the things they were really worried about was rehashing old world content. Right now we're currently getting we had an expansion where we dove into old Silvermoon, Eastern Kingdoms, everything else. This wasn't just another hey, add an island to the map expansion, and Blizzard said they were worried about that. Ian talks about it here. He says they weren't sure if the community would embrace returning to familiar locations or just see it as a rehashing of old content. But player enthusiasm is opening doors for them to revisit more iconic locations and tell new stories within them. I love this. I've been saying it ever since we got these revamps. I like how they did the revamps. I love what happened with the Eastern Plaguelands, the Dead Scars, Silvermoon, everything else that they changed up, where it still very much feels like those lands did, right? We're not seeing something on the likes of Cataclysm where they basically shattered everything and it doesn't even remind you of the old zones anymore. But a revamp or up-res, you could say, of these old zones, I think has been done very well. And I've been saying it ever since. I'm like, I hope they go around and do this in other places too. So going through Azeroth seems like a more realistic thing than it's ever been. As Ian says in the interview here, that it's opening doors for them to revisit more iconic zones. So excited to see where Blizzard goes from here. Hey, maybe we get an up-res to Ungoro or something. Those zones look harsh as shit. You go back to some of those really old zones right now, they look nasty compared to what we're getting in the game. So it'd be nice to see some of these old ones come back in terms of a new, Lordaeron, maybe. I wish Sir Slasher, maybe an up-res rebuilt Lordaeron. Hey, you never know. We could get what we asked for maybe one day. But good stuff here in the opening responses. Now, Ian got into the cost of bug fixes. Obviously, we know the bug release patches and how those have gone. And it's hasn't been the best. I think the War Within was a bit worse than Midnight in terms of launch days and how unplayable some of the content was. Overall, though, I think it has gotten better. Now, Ian did give the example of the elevator fix that forced them to shut down the entirety of player housing. He talks about how things happen in this game that you wouldn't expect, right? It's an older game. There's tons of things connected that you would never know were connected. They said they were fixing a bug that broke the Siege of Orgrimmar elevator, and they were trying to fix it. And in doing so, they led to a problem where anybody who walked into the player house that they had created caused all the items in the home to suddenly fall to the ground, right? Completely ruining everything they had done in their home. So they had to shut down player housing because of this. He used this as an example of stuff that they, Wouldn't expect to see coming, but through more testing, perhaps they could catch something like this. He also talked about how going forward, they're not focusing on fixing every little bug before a patch is released, but instead trying to catch the big ones, the ones that affect actual gameplay, and making sure that that's where they focus their time. Prioritizing is a matter of severity. He says how much and how many people is affected and what it costs to fix it. An issue may seem important, but at the time it takes to fix might be used to fix 10 other issues that have a greater combined impact than, say, that one issue does. He said it's always a balancing act. And yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Sure. Sounds like if you could fix 10 issues in 10 minutes, that could lead to better overall gameplay, maybe focusing on that one that you might think is a big deal, but not as big of a deal overall. Yeah, and it's going to take a long time to get that one fixed. Sure, fixing it down the line. I mean, obviously, I think if they just hired more people to test, hey, you might catch more shit, but that's not going to happen in today's world. They're probably going to try to figure out how the hell they could use AI to test shit more. They invented gravity. Yes, they did. Yeah, I guess with the elevator and Orgrimmar, they sure did. They talk about Silvermoon. Silvermoon is a vast and wondrous city, but pushed to its limits of client performance, they were forcing developers to throttle the number of players more. They talk about the number of players seen in Silvermoon and how it's caused them to throttle. Silvermoon is actually throttled harder than any other city in the game currently when it comes to the amount of players you're allowed to see on your screen. They said as beautiful as the city is, it's not acceptable to experience it as a slideshow. Even if players aren't making even though players are making Reddit threads about how empty the capital feels, the devs know that it's important to prioritize in order for the game to continue to feel like an MMO. So they're talking about figuring out ways to allow more players to be in the city on your screen without having the city, have performance issues. Obviously, Silvermoon graphically is a much heavier load for your PC than, say, Orgrimmar would be. So they're working, he says, on new technologies, new ways to allow more players to show up on your screen in high fidelity zones like Silvermoon. But for now, they're prioritizing basically a performance over what people want to see, which is a ton of players. But hey, a slideshow on your screen wouldn't be a great thing. So that's what he talked about when it came to bug fixes. Now, professions reset. He talked about the recent change in philosophy on professions and how going forward they're allowing for resets essentially on your knowledge points. A lot of you profession Andys already know this is coming in 12.1, but there's going to be a reset on your knowledge points. Now, Ian talked about how flexibility to reset anytime, flip your shit around, all that stuff, that's never going to happen. Because he said, well, basically what you would end up having in the WoW economy is people opening up things like the trade tab and everything else, just looking for what people want crafted or the crafting orders, and then just reprioritizing all their shit, making the shit, and then moving on to the next one. They don't want that to happen. I'm sure that's also a fight against bots, by the way, because I'm sure you could create bots that just sit all day and fulfill crafting orders and get tons of gold by just rearranging knowledge points all day, crafting, and then doing it again on the next one. So they don't want that kind of shit. He said they will continue to have lockouts on knowledge points. XD, thank you so much for the follow, man. Welcome to our Scourge. But they also look forward to giving players opportunities, more chances to reset the knowledge, build it out a new way in the middle of an expansion like they're going to do with 12.1. So I think that's a good thing for profession Andys out there. And he said they've been looking into this for a while. They're wanting to give players a way to add more customization and basically change the choices they made during an expansion. This is kind of their current solution to that. Solo content. Ian got into solo content talking about delves and everything else. And yes, Greg from accounting is a player that Ian specifically wanted to reach out to when it came to the kind of people that still play this game today. He said, delves have been one of the best additions in World of Warcraft history. Of course, it's still a massive multiplayer online game, but the desire alone, or the desire to play alone or in small groups in a world that is still full of people is not a new thing. Even going back to 2004, one of WoW's greatest strengths and claim to fame was the ability to solo all the way to max level, which wasn't always feasible in many other MMOs at the time. This is true. Of course, you could solo. I mean, I remember solo grinding a lot back in Vanilla WoW. I did play Vanilla WoW when it was current WoW. And yeah, there was definitely instanced content that you couldn't do alone. If you wanted to get into a group and do a instance or a dungeon or anything like that, yeah, there was no way you were doing that shit alone back then, and delves didn't exist. But certainly, if you wanted to solo grind your way from 1 to 60, you could definitely do it back in the old days. For years, he said, though, you could level to max on your own. but we're then left with very little to do on your own once you hit max level. Things like Delves and Prey help create a new perspective and goals for a surprisingly large group of players who don't get nearly as much attention from streamers and content creators. Damn, I feel like shots were fired. I'm a man of the people, and I speak about Greg all the time, so I'm obviously not included in this. When first announced, Delves received a lot of skepticism and criticism from the loudest voices in the community, who already have clearly established homes and in existing endgame activities. But Blizzard's player data tells a much different story. Blizzard wasn't initially sure if they would be an evergreen feature, but they're now doubling down with dedicated cross-disciplinary teams, learning more about what players do and don't like, and adding more variety and continuing to refine the system. We know they're continuing to refine this system. Obviously, we get new delves with every patch now, kind of like instance and raid content. It's just another version of content now that we get every single season and everything else. But, guys, labyrinths are coming, right? And labyrinths are going to be another version of delves. If you forget what labyrinths are, or you're not sure what the hell I'm talking about, because Blizzard really hasn't mentioned much about it since they announced Midnight, but labyrinths are going to be like raid content for delvers. That's what it's going to be. Basically, you're going to have these giant delves with massive wings of characters and things to grind through and bosses at the end of the wings that'll be locked out for the entire week. So you go into each labyrinth wing, you grind it out for a day, how long it takes you, and you continue to progress through the labyrinth, eventually that thing resetting on reset day. But you'll essentially have raid level content with all kinds of mechanics and everything to work through as a solo player. What's up, OnlyCam? Obviously, groupable content. You could do it in a 5-man group, just like you can currently do delves, but it's definitely set up there to be something that somebody who doesn't raid, only does delves, it gives them a new version of delve content they'll be able to do. So yeah, they're still iterating on delves, and I'm pretty excited to see where labyrinths go. I think it's going to be some great content for sure. Sam, I did solo back then. Probably he was just doing quests at starting zones. Maybe. As far as the Prey system goes, they said Prey is similarly expanding with new hunts, modifiers, locations, interactions, and Astrolore, who has been a surprising hit within the community. So yeah, everyone who likes Astrolore and everything looks like he's going to continue forward as well, which is good to see. For add-on overhauls, yes, the controversy of the add-ons. I'm not going to talk too much about this. I mean, everybody knows what's going on with add-ons and where they currently stand. Ian said here, controversial. But Ian believes that the add-on overall has been a success so far. There's still a lot more work to be done, he says, but by and large, the vast majority of players are now completing content at the same levels they previously were without the use of tons of add-ons. Obviously, with the simplification of the game, as I've told you guys before, just add-ons aren't required as much as they previously were. There's less mobs doing casts take longer, so you can interrupt them more easily. You don't need as many alerts as you previously did. We already know in 12.1, we're getting better visual fidelity with a lot of abilities, right? Soaks and frontal cones, frontal beams, things like that. It's all going to start to look more visually appealing, more visually, what do you say? What's the word I'm looking for? The visual language of it all will be more understandable. There's less confusion with abilities. You won't need an add-on to tell you what the fuck to do because it's going to be very obvious what to do. So yeah, without add-ons, me personally, I'm a non-add-on Andy. I've been saying this for a long time. I don't like add-ons. I think they're bad for the game, and a game should be able to be played without them. And WoW now is more playable without add-ons than it's ever been. So that's good. Yeah, distinct, I don't know. I was trying to say more visually clear, right? You can actually tell what the hell's going on. So we're going to see a lot of that, as I said before. Frontal cone revamps, everything else. More clear lines on the ground. Hopefully more color change, right? Where you don't have green shit on green floor. Obviously, that's always been a problem. So they're still working on things going forward, still making it better. As they said before, 12.1, he says, features more comprehensive overhaul that should close some more loopholes, as well as continuing to improve on the default interface. They're adding trinkets, racials, and potions to the cooldown manager, improving raid frames, and continuing to work towards giving players the ability to filter and emphasize different abilities. So again, they're just doing more and more to make sure that this game doesn't need add-ons and it's more playable. All those old add-ons that a lot of people used to love, Heckley, DPS meters, all kinds, it's in the game. And yes, it's not perfect yet, but they continue to iterate on it and it keeps getting better. So that's good to see. Also, innovating WoW over 20 years. That's right, a 20-year-old game. Ian commented on this. He said, WoW players are better than anyone. in the world at telling them when they're having fun. Continuing to innovate on a 20-plus-year-old game boils down to listening to players, looking at data, understanding gaps, problems, and opportunities. Most of the new features aren't necessarily direct suggestions from players. They're intended to fulfill a need and better serve a group of the community that was previously underserved, which is the genesis of features like Delves and Prey. Nobody was specifically asking for them, but nonetheless connected with an audience that wasn't served, but what was already being built. In terms of story, there's always a balance between foreshadowing and subverting expectations. Although sometimes criticized for being predictable, some things end up feeling that way precisely because it has been built up to that. And doing something wildly different would end up feeling out of character. Something the team worries about a lot is becoming too formulaic, though. So they're always trying to vary their approach in telling stories, whether it's individual character focus like on Anduin in The War Within, or digging deeper into troll culture in Midnight, which is what we're going to be getting in 12.1. He comments here on 12.1 saying, the trolls are an ancient and essential part of the lands, with a complex history that touches the dark relics and artifacts, which ties back into the overarching Midnight catching up with Xal'atath. It might initially seem like a side story, but as events unfold, it's clearly a continuation of the overall arc of Midnight. Yeah, I mean, I agree with him that trolls have a complex history, and they're ancient and part of this land. But why the fuck are they going to be playable? I'm going to keep harping on this. How could they not make Amani trolls playable? I mean, clearly Ian knows how important these guys are to the game and the history of the game. We need to make them playable. Overall, though, it'll be interesting to see how they tie it in with Xal'atath. Right now, I'm not going to lie, 12.1 does seem like a side story. It does kind of seem like, hey, we're taking a pause from the main story right now and going to play with some Amani trolls over here on this little island. But we'll see how they tie it all back together. Evidently, Ian says in the interview here that that's going to happen, so we'll see. And then finally, playing WoW in 2026. Modern World of Warcraft, he says, particularly since Dragonflight, is really focused on a player-first approach, meeting players where they are with their wide diversity of playstyles, preferences, and approaches to the game, trying to serve each of those while bringing players together and fostering interconnection. There's also several flavors of WoW to play aside from Midnight, which ties right back into the broader message of meeting players where they are. The developers have learned a lot about their players over 20 years, most importantly, that they are incredibly diverse and want different things, and Blizzard is trying to serve them the best they can. WoW used to be about not game knowledge, he says WoW used to be known as a game that would consume your life, that's true, and wasn't worth playing if you didn't have a ton of spare time. In 2026, it's still the same game that can immerse you and you can sink a ton of time into, but also has become a game that you can log into for 20 minutes and accomplish something meaningful. It's become a game where you can play solo with a large group of friends. They aren't moving away from what it used to be. They are just broadening and expanding the focus into all of those things and more. There's something for everyone in WoW today. And I do agree with that. While a lot of people say, oh, no, Blizzard's gone soft, they're giving gear to solo players and all this stuff, I just think they're diversifying the game because their player base is so diverse now. We're not all 16 years old anymore playing this game with all the time in the world to dive straight in. A lot of us have jobs, a lot of us have, married with kids, all this other shit going on. And yeah, certainly, and I said this when Delves came out back in The War Within, that I love the fact that I could log in for 20 minutes and feel like I was making meaningful progression on my gear. So that's great to see. I think Blizzard's done a great job overall with the game so far. There's been issues, obviously. It's not perfect, but I'm still a retail Andy for a reason. That's because I do enjoy the current state of the game. And hey, he does get into a little bit here, talking about how players love different versions of this game. Yeah, Classic Plus, I'm almost positive, is going to be announced at BlizzCon, and that's just another foreshadow he says here in this interview, that Classic Plus certainly is coming around the corner. What's up, Raiders? How's it going, man? And then finally, anybody want to give some questions to Ian? It looks like Ian's doing another interview here on Friday. Ian Hazzikostas will be in the WoW portal room for a Q&A with Varia. Okay, so if you want to submit your questions, you can do that here in the WoW Discord, the Wowhead Discord. I will link this in the chat and down below if anyone has questions for Ian that they want to submit before Friday. They said they're going to go through the questions and see which ones they want to ask. You can do it in the interview or Ian interview questions channel as I said before, on the Wowhead Discord. Submit your questions, and we'll see which ones get in here. And obviously, when that interview's done, we'll review it here live on the news. But for today, that is all in terms of news.